busy writers, you are listening to the Kobo Writing Life podcast, where we bring you insights and inspiration for growing your self-publishing business. We're your hosts. I'm Laura, one of Kobo Writing Life's author engagement managers.
And I'm Rachel, Kobo Writing Life's other author engagement manager.
Today we spoke to thriller author Aime Austin. Aime was born in Brooklyn, New York, and graduated from Smith College and Cornell Law School. She is the author of the Casey Court and Nicole Long series of legal thrillers and is the host of the podcast A Time to Thrill. Before writing full-time, Aime practiced family and criminal law in Cleveland, Ohio. When she's not writing crime fiction or interviewing brilliant creators, she's in a yoga pose, knitting, or reading. Aime currently splits her time between Los Angeles and Budapest.
We had such a lovely chat with Aime, covering a lot of her long-lasting, long-running indie career. We chatted about what it takes to write a long-lasting thriller series. We talked to her about her plotting of her thriller series, or lack thereof. Listen to find out if she's a pantser or a plotter. And we chatted a lot about her upcoming release, His Last Mistress. We talked about multiple narratives and thrillers. It was just such a fun conversation that covers so many topics. If you write thrillers or crime or legal drama, I highly recommend listening. I hope you learn a lot. We are joined today by author Aime Austin. Aime, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
As per usual, we like to kick things off by having our guests tell us a little bit about themselves and the books they write. So could you do that for us?
Sure. So I'm Aime Austin. At this time, I was thinking about this. So we did talk a few years ago, and I don't know. I looked at the shelf today to see like what I'd written since then, and the things we had all talked about have all like come to fruition. But at the time, it all felt like an idea. So I'm the author of legal thrillers, the Casey Court legal thriller, and the spin-off, the Nicole Long series of legal thrillers. And this book would be 15 in that long series. I decided to do a spin-off because it's getting long in the tooth. You want to like sort of expand on that, bring in new characters, that kind of thing. So Nicole has 5 and Casey has 10. But Casey appears in all of them. And actually, they're both in this last book, His Last Mistress. So it caps off like both of their stories because my readers they need that.
Well, we definitely want to talk to you about His Last Mistress in a little bit. But before then, I want to take it back to the beginning, because I know that you have worked in the legal system before as a lawyer. And I'd love if you could kind of chat about the transition from being a lawyer to being an author.
It was easy. No. I will say this. So when I was in law school, like a billion years ago, this is before computers, like we took notes on paper. And so in my class, there were like 175 people. And of those, I would say maybe 30 still practice law. So it's not, and I went to a school that was, I don't say this, I went to like a top 10 school. So the people there were like, I'm gunning for like, the big life. And I don't know, it's not soul crushing. It's really hard. Like, I wish somebody had told us, like I have friends who are lawyers and doctors, among other things. And if somebody had said to you, your whole life is going to be other people's problems, I think we may have approached it differently. Like nobody says it. They talk about the prestige and like, you're going to be like smart and thinking like smart things and doing smart things. And I don't know, all that. And you're going to have an office and nice clothes. I don't know, and a nice car and maybe a nice house. So people talk about like all these externalities, but they don't ever really talk about the nitty gritty of the job. And the nitty gritty of the job is every day people come in and they have a problem and they want you to solve it. And sometimes you look at me like, you're not going to solve this yourself. And they're like, I'm not coming to you. And so that I think was the hardest part. And I don't ever think about going back to it. I left in 2008 and I don't have any thoughts. But recently I was volunteering. So I live in Los Angeles. We had fires and they were looking for volunteers. And I have a friend who was like, you should do this. I don't know. She's very altruistic. So she sent me the thing and I was like, okay, I'll do the training and I'll go. So they had us doing assistance with people with like FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Association Administration in the U.S. Applications, talking to them about insurance, small business loans, things that like surrounding the fires. And for the one day I did it for many hours one day, I was like, oh, this is kind of fun. Like people came in with a problem. I have an answer. Like I'm like, I can have an answer. They take notes and they go away feeling satisfied. And I thought, oh, that's great. And then I was really also recently helping like a family friend with like some family law issues. And like I spent all day in court with her because nothing has changed. Like, I don't know, nothing has changed. And I spent all day in court with her and I thought, oh my gosh, she was like, everything you said came true. And I thought, oh my God, it's been like 25 years and nothing has changed. And I can't decide, like, I'm like, so my skills aren't just all rusty and ancient, but also how has nothing changed? Like, it's not an ideal system, and yet it's the same as it was all those years ago, except they have electronics now. So they have screens in there. And I was like, this is the big difference. They have screens. But essentially, the transition wasn't hard because well, for me, I found it a really highly stressful job where I took on too many people's problems, and that's not a joy for me. Maybe people like love problem solving and they don't take it personally, but people come to you with such personal issues. And, you know, everything is confidential. So you can't talk to anybody about it. So you're just like this like receptacle for people's really sad things.
I was shocked at first when you said how many people in your graduating class were still practicing law, and it's not that big a number. But then I'm thinking about all of the people that Laura and I have talked to on this podcast who are published authors now, who started out as lawyers and left their legal career. And that's always a correlation that fascinates me. But one common answer we get is that in the grand scheme of things, a lot of lawyers, especially trial lawyers, are storytellers. And it's taking the facts and telling a story. And I'm just always fascinated by the connection between lawyers and indie authors.
It may be true. So I know a lot of former lawyer authors. I'm sure we've talked to many of the same people, but also they have like a whole bunch of other jobs. So, I mean, an author is probably like the least popular one. So it's just people like really split off very early. I mean, I left when I paid off my loans for law school, and that was like the trigger for a lot of people. And you figure out you can live without, well, once you take off the payment, you can live fine without the income being so huge.
And once you transitioned into writing, did you always want to publish indie, or what has your publishing journey been like?
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, honestly. So when I started and when I entered into I'm going to be a published, I believe, I'm going to be a published author arena, it was the late 90s. So indie didn't exist. And that the whole like journey of having an agent and not selling. I mean, I just honestly, I didn't sell. And then entering romance all occurred before indie. So the first book I published was right on the cusp of that. And it was actually hard. I don't know how to explain it. It was hard to watch. So at the time I was a member of RWA and we had weekly meetings, and I'm sure you've met these women. These are the most business-minded women I have ever met in my life. And they're like, this is how it works. And so I had been on that trajectory of like, this is how it works. These are the editors you see. These are like the career paths that you can take. And then I get my book published, and it's published like an ebook, and we're watching. So like, I think my first book, I want to say it was December, maybe 2012. I'd have to think about that. And so I'm like doing this traditional published thing, and I'm watching indie people take off. And it was like sort of like mind blowing, but the publisher was not on board. So like we had other authors who were like, oh, you need to like recategorize our books. Our books are on the general, like some general categories on platforms, and you need to like be in specific categories. And like, these are the marketing tools. I did not have that savvy. And I was like, okay. And they're like, this is the published thing. They're like leaning into ebooks is not going to work unless they really embrace it. But it was like, we're going to publish these print books and look some ebook. You know what I mean? Like, oh, look at that other like cool thing that we're doing. And so I made the transition somewhat reluctantly, mainly because it was it was a huge transition and publishers weren't making it. And so the career that I thought I was going to have was not, I could see that was like not happening. And I was like, oh, I'm not going to have like, like 3 Harlequin titles and then like maybe a single title and maybe I'll be in a hardcover. Like that was not going to happen. And to be honest, it was really hard to take in because all this information was coming in about like ebooks and I just I had to sit down for 6 months and sort of like think about it. So I got my rights back, but I really sat around for 6 months trying to conceive of how then would I have a different career. But they were talking about 2013 and 2014. So it was hard to conceive of something that had not yet existed for a long enough period of time to be some history and like conversation about it. So like every meeting we had was just like, what do you do now? What do you do next? What do you do now? What do you do next? So it wasn't that it was bad. It was just, I'm not like an early adopter. I'm like, can I be like number 3? I want the first person, they can go set themselves on the fire. The second person can like do really well. And then call me. And then I'll see how it is. It was hard to be an early adopter when I didn't know what was going to happen, because certainty, I went to law school. I went to college, I went to graduate school. I understand a plan, and this was not a plan.
So as you're like an early adopter reluctant early adopter in the indie publishing world, how did you then like craft your career moving forward? Because indie publishing moves fast, so you can plan as much as you want, but it likes to evolve quickly.
On the fly. So, the beauty of like these other women is that like people sat me down at different times and they're like, you need to, I love them. And I've thanked them all profusely, like on my podcast, like I've had them all on. I'm like, thank you for like steering the ship, because I wasn't. But there were a number of people who were like, you should get into audio. So I got into audio in like 2014. So it was early. I remember like you put up audiobooks, you could like recoup your money in like a couple of days. It was great. So as an early adopter into audio, that was Deborah Holland. She was like, she followed me out to my car and she was like, make audio. And I was like, okay. Like Tessa Dare was like, you got to write in a series. Because that's not how romance had been, because there were series, but they were usually crafted by the publisher. So because books came out, even though romance came out very often, your individual books came out in a space and people were not sitting around waiting for the next book of the brothers or whatever. So Tessa Dare was like, you have to have a series. And I was like, okay. So, I took the advice. People were like, you have to have these kind of covers. And so lots of authors, like even Sky Warren, people like just look me under, they're like, do this. And I went to so many, it's just, I can't. I like Barbara Freeth at one time. She was like, don't do that. I was sitting in like San Francisco. She's like, don't do that. And I was like, okay. And like Bella Andre sitting next to her and she's like, yeah, don't do that. So, people specifically like asked specific questions and they gave me specific answers and I took the specific advice. That's really how it worked. Like these women really just said, do this or don't do that. And that's what I did. Cause like, I felt like when I was at home alone, I was flying blind.
It's one of those things we really love about the indie community is how willing they are to give that advice and help people along. And obviously it's still a very competitive field, but it is nice to have those like friendships and what's a really like solitary career. I can't sell how much that helped, because with that, I've met indie authors who are fairly solitary. I'm an introvert, but I get it. They're like way solitary. And without that advice, there was a lot of floundering. And I'm not going to say I didn't flounder, but I took it. Okay, I will do X. Okay, I won't do Y. Okay, I'm going to kill that cover. I heard you. Because I'm like, I spent $400 on that cover. And she was like, do you want to make money? Or are you attached to that cover? So what am I going to say?
That's so funny. And so like you're starting your indie career in romance. When did the shift to legal and crime thrillers happen?
Okay, so for me, there was no shift because the first book I wrote was a Casey Court book. It just didn't sell. So I wrote that and then it sort of, I didn't put it under the bed quite, but it was sort of hovering out there. And then I was like, well, I understand. I read romance. I'm in RWA. I understand. So I wrote those because I knew that they were much more likely to sell to publishers. That was a much easier path to publication. Not easy, but easier than selling a single book to New York. A crime that was harder, a lot harder, still hard. And so that was sort of the path I was on. And then after having written maybe 2 or 3 romances, I don't hate it. And why don't I see what I can do with that? So I do believe that that book was the first like all-in indie publication. It wasn't a rights back. It wasn't like a tag on series of books that I got in the rights back to. It was like sort of the first book that I was just like, okay, I'm going to try this, but in a different arena. And I will say this, indie publishing and like crime and thriller is very different than romance in a lot of ways.
And maybe this is like a really big picture question, but as somebody who like loves a procedural drama, loves a courtroom drama, what do you think it is about like court and the legal system specifically that it makes like such compelling thrillers?
For me, it's a sense of right and wrong and justice. I think most of us, not the sociopaths among us, but most of us, well, I think about sociopaths a lot. But the rest of us, I think, have a really strong sense of right and wrong. And I think that like watching people get wronged in the beginning, like murdered or injured or like having something wrong, is such a trigger that you're just like, I gotta get to the end to see if somebody gets justice. I love Law and Order. I'll watch like SVU. I've rewatched all like 25 seasons more than once, which is not great. But even knowing what it is, I'm like sitting on the edge of my couch going, but are they going to get are they going to get justice?
Is it hard for you to watch like Law and Order as a lawyer, like someone with a legal background? Does it bother you when things are wrong?
No. So I have a friend, I have a really good friend who's a lawyer, and she's like, I can't watch it. And I was like, but if we had, okay, especially because if you're out of jail, often like the time is told differently. Nobody's waiting 9 months to see whether or not, or whether you like try to delay your like trial and like 2 years from now, you're like, okay, now we have a trial. So I understand the compression and the procedural shortcuts that have to be taken to tell a compelling story. Doesn't bother me in the least. And I would love to be able to, if everybody could go to trial, I wish, everything were expedited, but court takes so long. If everything were just, that fast, it'd be great, because you could be in and out.
And so you mentioned that the, sense of justice and wanting to see justice served is what compels us to get to the end. But do you think that you necessarily need to see that justice be served? Or do you think that sometimes it's a more accurate depiction of the legal system when the bad guy gets away?
Oh, this is the literal fight of my daily life. So, because not every book I've ever written does the bad guy get his or her comeuppance. So, okay, I don't know what to say. I struggle with it because part of me is realistically, bad guys don't, because the essence of being bad and, them being sort of the hero of their own story is that they win sometimes. And I think that's okay. On the other hand, we do sit for the justice. Okay, personally, both as a storyteller and as a story consumer, I'm okay with either ending. I don't know if readers are. I have read some reviews. And so some readers are not happy, and I do not promise to provide them with an experience where the bad guy goes to jail, gets killed, gets his or hers or whatever. I don't promise that. But also I like a longer arc. There are books I've written where it's 3 books and it's just the bad guy builds up. And it seems like they seem okay. They don't seem okay. Oh, you know what I mean? But in order for you to do that, you have to have a separate story, where some justice happens. But not everybody gets, you have to be okay. I'm okay.
And one would argue that that's more realistic, right?
I think so. I think it's very realistic. I just sat in court the other day. It's just, I sat and watched maybe 7 or 8 cases, and you're like, that was good. That was bad. That guy just set his life on fire. You know what I mean? It's just, I watched one case, and there was a guy who came in and he's like, I'm the best person ever, yada, yada. And in court, he flamed out. The judge said, you have to wait 2 weeks or whatever she said, you have to, some delay. And he was like, I'm not doing that. He picked up his stuff and walked out the door. And I was like, oh, okay. And the judge is finding for the other side and be like, next. But so I was just like, wow. Some people sometimes show their true colors, but some people can hang on for the long haul.
Can you tell us a little bit about your new release, His Last Mistress, which Rachel and I have both read and we're really excited to chat with you about?
I sort of love it. So here's the thing. Because I read a lot, I'm sure that you know that like psychological thrillers have really like caught on. And I've been in a very, very procedural space, but I do think about people's motives. I've been reading a lot of books. Like I read The Sociopath Next Door and like, why does he do that? Like all these books about people with personality disorders and people who are abusive. And I find it really compelling because I don't think, and I think this is actually like, I think Law and Order is like a good example of this. I don't think it's reflected a lot in stories. I think we spend a lot of time with people who do like physically bad things or like, I'm going to steal your money or I'm going to steal your children or, whatever. Like they're very like visibly corrupt and bad. And I wanted to write something where the evil was more insidious, shall we say? And so in my head, like this is not something I think I've talked about, but I've thought about these characters for a long time. And I think like the heroine was introduced, she's her best friend of the main character. So they're having lunch like, 20 years ago. But the boyfriend guy, whatever, that she's involved with was actually he was introduced originally as a different sort of, not a different person, just ancillary to their lives. And he sort of like crept in. And I sort of like that because in my head, because characters are fully fleshed out in my head, I have a lot of feelings about them. Just because they appear on the page for 10 minutes and like dip in and out and do something stupid doesn't mean that they're not fully fleshed out. So in my head, the villain, I guess, was like always this insidious person. And he just like sort of wormed his way back into their lives. And I really wanted to explore that. Like, people for a long time, but you don't ever have a sense, I think, from the outside about how they truly behave or how they're truly evil or I think people may have that. And so I just like the idea of exploring somebody that you've known and they worm their way into your life. And you're like, oh, this is worse than I thought. But because there's such a level of because the villain is an attorney, there's such a level of people give, I think, professionals a pass. So I think if you're a villain and you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, I don't know, you're an engineer, whatever, you can get a pass for a much longer time. And I think I wanted to explore that where things look great on the surface, but really there's something more going on underneath. But everybody's like, they're so nice. They have a great job. They have great money. They have a great house. They have a great wife. Whatever those surface things are end up holding more weight societally than I think they should, to be frank.
And when did you decide, when you were like slowly building these characters through other books, when did you decide that this was the story you were going to tell and when? Like, did you know several books ago and you started planting seeds, or did it kind of come together and you're like, oh, this is going to work?
I knew 5 books ago. And that's never happens. I was like, oh, so when I last talked to you, I don't even think this book, I had just either started writing or finished writing, who knows, the book. I wrote this book called Abuse, and it was like the first time I talked about abuse. So I've talked about all these things like sex trafficking, child abduction, kidnapping, corrupt judges, corrupt lawyers, corrupt courts, corrupt jails. I've talked corrupt police. So I've talked a lot about, over time, lots of different people who are not great. But when I was writing Abused and these characters started seeing each other, I was like, I think there's more to this. So in that book, I started layering the beginnings of that. Whether I carried it through all the books, I'd actually have to think about. This is one of my things as a writer I should be better about. Let me just say that. But when I finished that book, I thought, I'm going to write that. And then it didn't happen because it wasn't ready. I wanted to talk more about this other character and her alcoholism for some reason. That was quite fascinating to me.
And this universe, like the Casey Court series especially, has a lot of books in it. Do you have any advice for authors who want to write a long-running series?
Don't do it. No, I think it can't. No, the mistake I made, and the authors and I have talked about this recently. We think, and this is like as far as business goes, we would be better served to write trilogies. Groups of 3, because what ends up happening, like I get these emails every day. It's like it hurt. I get these emails every day. I was reading my emails last night, and it's like can I start on this book? Is this going to be a standalone? Do I need enough background and all of that? And I think that if we limited them to 3, maybe 5, I don't know, then people could sort of dip in at like different parts of the series and still get the universe. Because I don't think any of us specifically try to write books that are not standalones or that cannot be enjoyed. And personally, I think they can, but I don't have enough objectivity to know that. But I've had people read some books and not others, and people have not complained about that. But you often say, so I'm going to go back and read the rest because I want to know what happened.
I mean, one could argue that it's like SVU, where you don't have to watch seasons 1 through 15 to understand what's happening in seasons 16 through 25, as somebody who has also watched all of Law and Order several times and Criminal Minds. But I'm curious, because you mentioned like there's not necessarily like an in book when you have a long series other than book 1, like that is the introduction to all the characters, the backstory. How do you keep readers coming in, like new readers coming into your series when it hits that 15 book mark?
So my method, I don't know what other people do because I should probably know this better, is that I introduce new characters. So the first book, let's say it's Casey and whoever. So she's a through line character in many of the books. But I introduce new characters so that you can get the perspective of the world from people who also are not in it, because people come in and out of your lives. It's not like everybody was there from the time you were born until now. So people come in and they get that perspective. Like, I met you at 32. Like, I was talking to a friend from college and she was like, you want to FaceTime? And so I met her when I was 17 or 18 and I looked at her on FaceTime and she's got gray hair. And I was like, oh, like it was just, but in my head, when I think of her all the time, I think of her as a 17 or 18-year-old. Clearly she's not. But obviously people who like met her recently or who've met me recently have met me as like this fully formed adult and not like a teenager. So I think just by introducing new point of view characters who come in, like, I just moved to Cleveland and look at this corruption, or I just moved here and I'm going to put you all in jail, or, so I think that's the way I try to do it, so that you too can come to the universe in the same way that they do, with only the information that you're given starting when you enter.
And I wanted to talk a little bit more about His Last Mistress. How did this idea come about? And can you kind of give us maybe a spoiler-free synopsis for our listeners?
Shall we say? So I have a character, her name is actually Tallulah, but her name is Lulu. We call her Lulu. And I actually didn't know her real name. Like, I sat down, I was like, oh, does she have a real name? I was flipping through notebooks from like 10 years ago. And then I remembered her name because I used her nickname. But in law school, they spend a lot of time basically eating Chinese food and talking about men. And, but they're both lawyers. And she never dated. And I don't know why. I have to think about that. But she enters into a relationship with a man, and it becomes like this all-consuming thing. So she's in her 30s and living in a big city as a single woman in your 30s. There's a lot of pressure put on to relationships at that age. Your 20s, you can do whatever. But in your 30s, everybody's like, are you going to marry him? Are you going to have kids? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? And so I think that she comes in this relationship with a person who was, had been a professor at her law school. So I don't want to say like had authority, but like kind of a mythical figure in her mind. And she's in this relationship and she puts a lot of pressure on like what it's going to be and, what does it mean? And now I'm like finally dating in the world where everybody else has been dating the whole time. And I think that it just explores sort of the societal pressure to be in a relationship, but she's in a relationship with somebody, and this is not a spoiler, it's in the other book, who's married. And tells the story that I've learned from, not like my experience, but I've learned from experience that people tell, the marriage is over, we're not really married, we're together for the kids, for the health insurance, for the business, for the whatever the reasons are. And she buys it, hook, line, and sinker. And I don't think that it's not that those stories aren't believable. I think from the inside, I think that's what I wanted to explore. From the inside, that is believable. Oh, well, he doesn't really love her. He's moved out, or he's wanted to move in with me. He wants to do all these things. He wants to have a future. He wants to have babies. And I think at her age and place in life, that is compelling. And I wanted to explore how that was compelling without the whole homewrecker stereotype. And I wanted to do that because she's like a well-accomplished intelligent woman, and yet she falls for the same story that women and men too have fallen for time immemorial. And I sort of wanted to explore that, but then also make it more insidious because,
One plot device that I was really excited to talk to you about is the first part of this book, because a lot of your novels, as we have talked on this podcast before, and we will talk about in a moment, have multiple POVs. But the first part of this book is told from the point of view of a therapist and the sessions she has with two of her different clients. And I'm so curious why you set the story up this way, because I loved it.
I'm gonna be honest. Like okay. Many, many years ago, I was having my house renovated and I was but I was living in it. Don't do this. And so I was stuck upstairs. Like, I had a microwave or whatever. Like I was stuck upstairs in a room. And this is the early Netflix era. And I got the CDs for Sopranos. And people were like, you should watch this. And I was like, I don't like violence. Like Mobsters seems played. And I put the first one in like at 8:00 and I didn't go to bed till 1 a.m. because I was like, if somebody had told me he was in therapy, I would have thought something entirely different about this show. I thought it was just me guy like burying people in New Jersey and putting them in cement shoes. And I grew up in New York. That story, I could see less of it. And there's some reason that the device of therapy I found utterly fascinating, because usually the problem I find with characters is that they're not particularly self-aware. Like, we write them as like they're going through life and this is the thing that they come across and this is how they overcome it. And maybe they have like tinges of self-awareness or they change who they are and things like that. But I like the idea that these people recognize that there was something wrong in their life and they wanted to figure out how to like move past that hurdle. And I also like the device. I really struggled with this of therapists seeing two clients and whether or not it was a conflict. And I had to call, I don't know if you know Grace Calloway. She used to be a therapist before she wrote Historical. And I'm on the phone with her. I'm like, can we talk about this conflict that I see? We had a very long conversation about whether or not that could be a conflict. But I really like the idea of you finding out something about people and them talking in a way that was particularly vulnerable. And I think people talk to therapists, and I don't know, I've gone to therapy, but I only have one experience, and obviously, but I would like to think that people talk to therapists in a way that they don't talk to other people. So even you don't talk to your best friend, you don't like share all your warts because you want to have some kind of semblance that you're not completely crazy. So I just wanted them to be able to have these conversations where they're vulnerable and you found out things that they would not normally share in any conversation that you're just having with friends, relatives, spouses, kids, parents.
And aside from, I guess, chatting with Grace, did you do any other research on therapy speak and therapists, or was it just kind of like based on your thoughts of how it would go, I guess?
It's my thoughts of how it would go, with apologies to any therapist I've had. Because all I could think was, oh, God, I would not say that. So with those apologies. So I talked to Grace a lot. We were like at a beach thing, and then I was like emailing or talking. And I don't have any other friends who are therapists. So it was more about, like, I did spend some time online researching, like, how do you make people comfortable in the office when I was setting the scene? Because I actually had no idea. I never thought about it. Like, I never thought about how people make that space comfortable other side than like the couch, you know what I mean? And so that people can be vulnerable. And I was like, so it has to be like low lighting and, it can't be like a clinical setting. So it has to be like low lighting and like millennial gray is great, apparently, like with a little green and a tissue box and all these things. And allowing people to have different seating options was a huge thing when I was doing some research. And I hadn't, because some people are like, I can't sit on the couch because then, you're going to think whatever people think about the therapy couch. And so they're like, I'm going to sit on the chair. I'm going to sit far away from you. I'm going to sit close to you. And like, I'd not thought about it ever. And I thought it was sort of fascinating the way you can make people feel comfortable, but still, like, the therapist in this book has a swivel chair. So people are like, I'm going to be out of your eye vision. And she just swivels. And I love that. She's like, no, I can see you. I see what you did there. So that research I did. And there's a lot online about how to set up a therapist office.
I will say this, is that it made me rethink the appearance of my therapist's office, because I had never thought of it before. And I'm like, oh my God, it's all intentional. God.
Same. I was like, oh, this is not just an act. She didn't walk in this room and think, oh, look, let's get a chair. I was like, oh, this is all intentional. But I do believe my therapist had, this is pre-COVID because things changed for a lot of reasons, obviously. I believe she had a swivel chair. I'm not sure. I should actually ask.
I was going to say, I'd be paying very close attention next time I'm in their office. I don't know if this is a good segue, but this book and a lot of your books do cover a lot of really dark topics. Like you've mentioned, sex trafficking, kidnapping, adultery. And this one really includes, like, you know, aside from spoilers, crime and violence, but financial and emotional and physical abuse. And I'm really curious how you kind of balance and keep a delicate hand when discussing such hard to handle topics in your books.
Can I say thank you for thinking I keep a delicate hand? Let me say this. When I read books that are too graphic or too much, I can't handle them. Like, I started reading a book and somebody was like, it was clear that they were going to torture an animal to figure out how to torture people. And I was like, this is for Little Free Library, because I can't stomach it. I can't stomach it at all. And I can't visually watch any of it. Like, that's why I didn't want to watch The Sopranos, because I was like, if this is going to be violent, then I'm going to have nightmares for 3 days. So I think I do it to preserve my own sanity. Like, I want to talk about it, but if I went down that dark hole, you may never see me again. I may just be laying in bed crying. Like, it would just be too sad, too graphic, and too much. And so I want people to know what happened, but I don't want you to have to see the things. I would rather you hear it. Like, I'd rather characters talk about it and not describe everything so on the nose. I want to leave a little bit of, not mystery, I don't mean it that way, but it just be a little bit more oblique.
And do you ever, like you mentioned, if it gets too graphic, you find yourself like struggling with it and, you know, your words are cool, hiding away. Do you have any like coping mechanisms that you use when the subject matter does get really dark, something that you could share to other authors who write in the crime murdery genre?
I maybe put it away. So I'm working on a book now. I'm working on a pure standalone psychological thriller, and like 48,000 words. I was like, you know what? Because the villain's getting he's making me uncomfortable. And I'm like, why are you at her house? Like, why are you at her house? You don't need to be at her house. Are you going to ruin her career? Like, I was like, don't. Like, you just showed up to her, like, premiere, like on the red carpet, and you served this. Like, and I'm just really uncomfortable. I'm really actually struggling with how depict this way he like rapaciously takes over her life without doing it. So the way I cope is not doing it. And I want to delve more into that. And I'm struggling with it, to be frank. I'm really struggling. But my goal is not to have nightmares. So if I'm like laying down and I have a nightmare, I'm like, I got to back away.
I think not having nightmares is like a really solid goal.
No, I need a good night's sleep now. I'm too old to have not a good night's sleep anymore.
Now, I've alluded to this topic already, but last time you were on the podcast, we did talk quite a bit about using multiple points of view to tell a story, and His Last Mistress is no different. You have several points of view. You start with the therapist, and then you get into the heads of your other characters. And I'm just so curious, what is it about using different voices that you love when it comes to writing a story?
Because people... The thing that I think I dislike most about living is that I only get to live this one life. Like, you know, people are always like, if you could have like a superpower, what would it be? And mine is like mind reading, because I just want to know what, if people are like flying, I'm like, that's what planes are for. Like, I just want to know what people are really thinking. Like, I can't tell you, like, every day I get, if I just want to know, like, even when I take a walk in the neighborhood, I'm looking at people's houses, I'm like, but what are you really thinking? So it's just the thing I'm so curious about. And I feel like, I'm sorry, I'm writing a story from only one point of view, and it's really hard. I feel like, and I've written more than one, I've done it before, but I just feel like if you could just know what everybody's thinking, then you can have like a much better picture of the entire story and world. And I just want to provide, like, as far as storytelling goes, I want you to have as much information as is reasonably possible to figure out why people are doing what they're doing, rather than like just some protagonist sitting there going, well, he just did that. And then you're like trying to like weave in backstory or trying to have conversations with people. I just rather them tell you what they're thinking or not thinking or doing or not doing, or they're talking in complete lack of self-awareness.
Do you ever find that you have to like pull back or show restraint when it comes to investigating different points of view to make sure you're not giving the reader too much insight or information?
Yes and no. I will say this. I think that I go into characters with them having the same limited self-awareness and awareness of the world that most people have. So if I think people are going in, they were talking about like you only use like 10% of your consciousness and the other 90%, you're just like running on autopilot. I think people are just running on autopilot. So I don't think, to me, it's not that hard because I think people don't necessarily think that deeply.
So before we started recording, you talked to me and Rachel a little bit about your plotting board and how it's going for your current story. So I want to dig into that a little bit. Do you start writing knowing how the book will end, or how much do you kind of plot ahead of time?
I have an idea. Like, I'm going to write a book about it's actually just the kernel of an idea. So like I wrote a book called Kidnapped, like this is many years ago. So there was an article in the LA Times. I have it clipped somewhere. It literally clipped somewhere in a folder where they talked about people adopting children in China who were not like, I don't want to say technically available, but not available for adoption. Like their parents had placed them there for poverty reasons or whatever. And those people thought they were getting their children back when they figured out their situation. And how some of those children, especially girls, because of that issue with the one-child policy at the time it existed, were adopting those children and parents are coming back and they're like, where's my kid? And they're like, America, or England or whatever, wherever it was. And so that it was just a kernel of idea, like what would happen if you were in the point of view of the mother whose child was adopted and you had no plans for that to happen. So that's it. Like, that's it. That's the idea. Now, then you need like 79,000 more words past that idea. And then I sit down and then figure it out. But it's within the structure of like crime. I don't want to say it's easy. That there has to be like a crime. And there has to be like a courtroom scene, the part I actually hate writing. There has to be some kind of resolution. So there is a certain framework around it. And then it's just me sitting at the computer every day going, I wonder what happens next. Because I'm telling myself the story at the same time I'm writing it, because I have no idea what's going to happen next. My plotting board now is I have an easel and I turn the piece of paper and it's just like, what are her fears? And then now I'm going to like horribly probably give her every horrible thing that could ever happen to her is going to happen to her now.
Your poor character.
It's not going well. Her name is Summer. I really like her. Sweet summer child.
Poor Summer being tortured by you. And so like one thing that is very common in thrillers, in legal dramas, is a red herring, a misdirect for the reader. And as you are learning this story, as you write it, at what point in the writing or editorial process do you start to kind of work in a little bit of misdirection?
It's because I'm misdirected. I'm like, what if X happened? And then you get past that and you go, nope, that's not it. And then I'm like, oh, it has to be something else. So it's the misdirection you're reading is me being misdirected, thinking, oh, that's the solution. And then realizing, oh, that can't be the solution. So I was just reading a review of His Last Mistress. I was on NetGalley yesterday, I think, looking at some review, and somebody's like, I thought I had it figured out, and that was not it. And I was like, me too.
I love that. I don't think it can get more real than that. One of the other things we wanted to talk to you about was your podcast. You're the host of your own podcast, A Time to Thrill. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do there?
So now, because now all these years later, so basically my whole thing, because I've narrowed it down, is interviewing what I call brilliant and creative women. There's so many women like that we've talked about who I have met along the way, and they're so savvy and so smart. And so it's fascinating to me that they can like create like books or art or whatever they're creating, and also like be running these like multi-million-dollar businesses. And I'm like, look at you. So I just really wanted to feature them. But the other thing that I really like about it is having the opportunity to have a conversation with them. And it's often because we see each other at conferences, or we're all in like these group settings, or even when we're together for like 3 or 4 days, there's like a lot of us. And so you have like this little conversation, this little conversation, this little conversation. And I love them and I know them and I know about their kids and their families and all that. But I think we don't spend enough time talking about their creative process and their business acumen. And to me, it's just so amazing that so many women are so smart. I'm watching them like put out books, and then you're also like harnessing this whole business. And it's fascinating. And I really like to share that with readers because there's more to us or more to them than just the creative output.
This might be a very hard question, and for that, I do apologize. But is there like one thing that you have learned from interviewing someone or something that kind of stands out that either helped you as an author or helped you in your indie publishing business?
No, I think it mostly has helped me as a person. So I've had these conversations where people like give out these little nuggets that are just like, oh, like it's just changed my mind about something so much. I think, I was like, it's just so many different people, but people like, we're just talking about like people saying things in general, like one conversation I was having. And I was talking about people saying I'm nice or I'm whatever. And she says to me, but if they're saying that, then they're usually hiding something else. And I literally was like, what? You know what I mean? And I had to step back, close the computer and have a think about that. But there's been many of those little nuggets of thought that have really made me rethink my perceptions of life, my perceptions of people, my perceptions of creativity, and my perceptions of business. And I can't tell you how, like, I wish I had these conversations 30 years ago. I'm just like, what? If you had said this to me 30 years ago, I'd have lived my life differently. Like, it's just those little insights that have been really mind-blowing for me.
Do you think that the insights that you're being given into life is influencing how you write your characters?
That's a good question. Yes. I will say that, yes, because I'm thinking about the book I'm writing now. Yes, because it makes it easier for me to see. Let me say this. It's as if my life were a little blurry and the podcast has sort of been like, it's like I have photograph as a hobby, and before autofocus, you had to focus yourself. And so you look through the viewfinder and it was like a little blurry, and you turn the focus around the lens and it becomes clear, or even like going to the eye doctor. And I think that is what's happened. So people's motivations have become a little clearer to me. So even with the book I'm writing now with this guy who's like, I'm a great guy, he's not. Spoiler alert, he's not. It's been clear. It has made the writing easier in terms of clarifying his facade versus who he really is.
Outside of writing thrillers, you also write romances under the pen name Jolie Moore. What inspired you to write romance? Was it just something you loved as a reader, or?
Loved. So I read a lot. I read everything. Probably half of what I read is actually nonfiction. But let's just say, and I don't read romance as much as I used to. Actually, I have less time now. But let's just say from the age of like 8 or 9 to the age of about 25, the majority of what I read was romance. I have read thousands of them. I love them. Even though it's going to happen, and what I love is the watching characters evolve. So the thing about crime fiction that is different, very different for me, is that there's an outside something happening. Somebody gets killed, somebody gets hurt, something happens. The thing I love about romance is the kinds of romances I read generally. Nothing outside happens. We have two people who are together for like 60 to 80,000 words, and they have to work it out. It's like so delicious. I'm like, look, I love a romance where they're in a cabin in the snow and they can't leave because there's nothing. It's like, here's a big mirror, go. So I just love the idea of people being together and having to figure it out. It couldn't be any better than like figuring out that you deserve love, that you want love, that you love this person without having to like go through some other external thing. Like, I just adore it. I could not adore it more.
Another hard-hitting question today. Favorite recent read as somebody who loves to read as much as you?
Wow. Okay. So my favorite reason to read is not great. It's this book called Original Sins. It's nonfiction, and it's about like, it's called like the miseducation of like African Americans and Native Americans in America. And it's about like structural racism in America through education. Like, it's a woman like Eve Ewing. Like, I read a lot of nonfiction about like American history. And she starts with the first book that Thomas Jefferson, first book, I think only book Thomas Jefferson wrote. I didn't know he wrote a book. She includes passages from the book. It's not great. It's not great. I mean, we know he's a slaveholder and we know all this, but it's really not great. And like the way he talks about people, it's pretty horrible. And for knowing so much, I'm not saying I'm an expert at anything. It was like an eye opener to so many things I didn't know.
That actually sounds really good, and I'm going to be adding it to my Kobo library as soon as we are done recording, especially if there's audio.
Great. Oh, there is audio because I have both. Because I listen, I read when I'm home and then I listen while I drive, so I can keep it moving. So there is audio, and I think it just hit the New York Times bestseller list like the week or two after it came out. I got an early copy, so. That's the only time, I'm going to be honest. Like literally, I've never called in a favor and I really wanted to read the book. And I was like, who do I have to call to get this book? And I called to get the book and I never do it. But it's really that good.
Thank you for the recommendation. That was just a question off the cuff. And that's a very different answer than what I was expecting, given that you had just talked about reading 1,000 romances. No, as the like one of the nonfiction readers, like I'm the sci-fi fantasy girly on the KWL team, but I also love nonfiction, so that is right up my alley. And it's a hard read. Like it's, you know what I mean? Like it's hard. I mean, Thomas Jefferson's like, these people are not smart, but they're happy, and you're just like, oh, here we go. I mean, given the synopsis, I didn't anticipate it was going to be a fun
joy
in the world. Yeah. And I have one more question for you that is much less difficult, I assume. But as somebody who has written in both romance and mystery, I'm curious if it's ever a challenge to enter the correct state of mind for the genre in which you are writing, or if it's easy to kind of shift back and forth.
So I don't shift back and forth, like in the sense that if I'm going to write romance or women's fiction or whatever, I'm only doing that. I don't edit other books. I don't think about the other books. So in the crime, like in my head, this is like this world in Cleveland that happens. And so if I entered that world has no romance. Nobody's having a good time. Like there's not a happy world. So that world to me is completely separate from writing about these people who are together and eventually going to fall in love. They're just not in the same universe. It's like sometimes I live in LA and sometimes I live in Budapest. They're not the same. They're never going to be the same. They don't exist in the same. They do exist on the same earth, but they're never going to be together.
And it's been great chatting with you. But I wanted to get a preview about what you're working on next for our listeners.
So I'm working on a standalone psychological thriller, and it's the first book that I have written that takes place in Los Angeles in a long time. My first romances were in LA, but that was, we're talking about 2011, 12, 13, 14. The last series of romances were in like New Jersey, LA. They were traveling around a bit. But this is the first time I'm writing in LA, and it's so interesting to write where you live in modern day. So like I was going out to brunch with a friend and I was looking for a parking space around the corner to look at like the neighborhood. But it's a standalone psychological thriller. It's a woman who's about to hit the peak of her life and she meets a man and it's not going well. I think he's going to take her down. But he's a nice guy.
He's a great guy.
He's a great guy. He's a nice guy. He'll tell you, hear him back about how nice he is.
Woof. I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to chat with us today. So before we let you go, where can our listeners find you online?
So everything is at Legal Thriller Author. Thank God for having one handle. And then the other one is XO Jolie Moore. But I haven't written a romance since 2019, maybe. And I don't know if I'm going to go back to it. I don't know. Like, I don't know. I'm trying to stay in one lane, which is advice I got and didn't take 10 years ago. So maybe I'm taking that advice now and staying in one lane, but everywhere it's legal thriller author.
Awesome. Well, Aime, thank you so much for hanging out with us today, for giving us the chance to read His Last Mistress. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's great seeing you.
Thank you for listening to the Kobo Writing Life podcast. If you're interested in picking up Aime's books, we will include links in our show notes. If you're enjoying this podcast, please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe. And if you're looking for more tips on growing your self-publishing business, you can find us at KoboWritingLife.com. Be sure to follow us on social media. We are at Kobo Writing Life on Facebook, X, Instagram, and Threads.
This episode was hosted by Laura Granger and Rachel Warden, with production by Terrence Abrahams. Editing is provided by Kelly Robotham. Our theme music is composed by Tearjerker, and a huge thanks to Aime for being our guest. If you're ready to start your publishing journey, sign up today at kobo.com/writinglife. Until next time, happy writing.